then I won't always get it out. Um, but the other thing that I do too is slow down my speech. Like I'm a super fast talker, and the more emotions that I have around something, the quicker that I seem to speak. And it sometimes gives the impression of like it sometimes presents me in a way that is not true to how I'm feeling, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So I start to try to slow down how I'm talking, and that helps me calm down.
Hmm. I really like that one, Tracy. That one's not on my list. Have you ever noticed that people who race to fill silence are often come across as the most nervous, right? And people who embrace silence seem to have a confidence. Yeah.
Yeah. I think in sales, like that's one of the things that I've learned a lot in CS is, and also in conflict resolution. I feel like if you're not talking, you come across as more confident. Like if you give that space, people will fill it that need to fill it. Whereas if you can like just be quiet and leave space, especially dealing with like, subordinates when there's a conflict,
Yeah.
a lot of times I just let they just like dig themselves into a hole, right? Like and you're like, okay, like we don't have, you know what I mean? Like I think that sometimes that space allows people to either calm down, or then you really see like the true issue that's there.
Mhm.
Um, because they're so anxious about whatever.
I have a next level addition to that, just to build on that, Tracy. I had this conversation this week with a senior executive client that I'm coaching, and we were talking about negotiations and heated conversations. And I said that I sometimes have this mantra, which sounds a little bit evil, but I don't mean it that way. It's a way of giving myself a pep talk when things get really heated and there's a decision, like someone's got to say something. What I say to myself is, the next person that speaks loses. And then I go, hmm? And I embrace the silence because I'm not losing this. It's not that I'm hyper competitive necessarily. I don't think I am, but when things get really heated and I notice that I'm like, ugh, I just go, Andrea, shut your mouth. The next person that speaks loses. So I think that you have to be careful about using that one, right? But okay, who are you going to tag, Tracy?
I'm gonna tag Richard.
Hello. So I also am a big believer in the power of the pause. I think that that's really great. But when I need to boost my confidence, it's reminding myself I probably, although I may not feel I know a lot, I probably know more than most of them anyways. At least on the subject I'm talking about, because they came to hear me. So they assume I have something that I know that they don't. And so um, it's kind of reminding myself that in theory, I'm at least the expert in the room, if not an expert.
I just read today an article in HBR about when you are invited to give a speech and everybody in the room knows more than you do. And her main point was, remind yourself that there's a reason they invited you to come in. You do know more about your unique perspective, right? Love it.
Thank you.
Yeah. Who are you going to tag, Richard?
I'll tag, I guess I'm going to follow the grid. I guess Jennifer is on my list next.
Yeah, sure. So when I felt a shot of adrenaline, I think that usually happen when people ask me question and that was like, oh, unexpected, or I just didn't think, like I didn't prepare that question. So what I usually do, and then I think learned through the years was like, I will remind myself, don't rush to give an answer, because rushing to give an answer usually is the worst answer. So I will like take a pause and then think about it. And then I will even tell the person like, let me think about it. And then I will kind of like talk through like, I can see this, but let me get back to you. So just give myself a space to think about that. Like I say, I'll acknowledge what they are asking. I understand their question. And then, but I don't have an answer immediately. I need to think about it. To prepare for the presentation, well, I think I prepare like before the presentation, I will do two things. So One is practice. And the other thing is actually, I'm a runner, so I would definitely do a run before. So to keep myself like just like optimistic. Yeah.
Excellent. I love how you shared both what you do in advance and in the moment. By the way, if you don't already have your worksheets open, there's a page, I'm actually writing notes from what you guys are sharing, that has 2 columns. It's the live coaching worksheets for today. The reason there's 2 columns here is one column, I'm hoping you can write down things that you would do in advance. And in the other column, write down suggestions that pique your interest in terms of what people are sharing about what to do in the moment. Okay. Who are you going to tag, Jennifer?
Stephen.
So for me, when I'm either asked a question or challenged, I take it as an opportunity to establish a conversation with the person. So I do follow the same approach that Jennifer follows. I pause, I think about how I can add value to that person. And then I respond in a thoughtful way. So I don't just give a surface level answer. I try to hit the fundamentals of what they're asking for. And what I look for there is the tonality, whether it was a question or a challenge.
Mm.
And depending on the tone of what they used, I'll choose a response associated with that intent. Now, in terms of preparation, I know that early in my career, I was very focused on content, and I found that my presentations were very academic. They were just showing off how smart I was. And no one wants to hear that. It's like, okay, well, we know you're smart, you're here. And I found out that what I really needed to do was describe the challenge I had that I felt someone else was having.
Mm.
My audience is there, at least one person is there with the same issues I might be having. So I would always come to a presentation or a workshop with a difficulty that I'm dealing with. I don't make it about how smart I am, saying, hey, I'm having a hard time doing this. Here's my journey so far. Here's what I'm having a hard time with. And there, I found that it is more conversational. I'm trying to get people to join the conversation,
Mm-hmm.
to learn from them, but also to share, hey, here's what I was able to figure out. And they're able to learn from me. And that actually makes it a lot more comfortable for me because now I'm not feeling like I have to look smart. It's about sharing challenges.
Mm-hmm. Stephen, it sounds like you are well on your way to developing next level listening in particular. That's what I'm hearing. I love your point about identifying from the person's tone, whether they're challenging you or they're curious about something.
Mm-hmm.
I remember identifying that when I was a faculty member at the University of Toronto with these undergraduate students are lovely. They really are there to learn. In my experience, the MBA students often, they're there to show everyone how smart they are, and they try to do so by challenging the faculty. And I had to be really careful if someone was challenging me versus genuinely curious. I love that. That is next level listening too, right? Not just the words, but interpreting the motivation for the question.
All right, Priscilla's next.
All right. I'll start with like how I prepare, right? I usually try to switch the words if I'm nervous. I just keep telling myself I'm excited. I'm excited just to trick my brain. Because it's the same feeling, right? Like the sweaty hands, the heart racing. So if you're telling yourself, I'm excited, your brain just listens. You're excited, so this is good. Also, like taking deep breath, pausing, and smiling, because you're also signaling to your brain that everything's okay, right? When you smile, your brain like, oh, it's okay, everything's okay. So you have to constantly just trick your brain because your brain and your body is just like coordinating. I feel like even when I'm working out and doing something difficult, I try to smile because then my body's like, okay, everything's okay. It's not that heavy. It's okay. I did that once when I had to present to the whole company and I was like freaking out because it was the whole company and everyone had brought something special to do with them. But the 2 weeks before that was so heavy that I was like, you know what? I don't have anything too special to show them, a special talent. So I asked the whole company to take a deep breath and kind of pause and like do that. But that was really for me, right? But it kind of helped like everyone to like take a deep breath, concentrate, and it gave me the chance to take a deep breath in front of everyone and not having them notice. So
Love it. I love all of these things. I've written lots of notes here. I hope you have as well. Before we get into some of the hacks that I want to share with you based on my personal experience and based on what I usually coach senior executives on when I'm doing the one-on-one coaching that I do, I want to just remind us of this framework, which is here. So we're today focusing on the second step from the bottom, right? So we generally have an understanding of what the significant communication skills are, and I mean, you wouldn't be here if you weren't devoted to improving, like tactically improving your communication skills, right? Things like listening. We talked about this list last week. Storytelling, dealing with difficult people, demonstrating leadership. I could go on and on and on. That list actually includes the things on the second step. So I was thinking about today and, in every session, going back to this model and explaining where we are and not just reminding us now we're on step 2. There's something unique about this step. So when I have been coaching over the last several years, these ambitious executives, I've noticed that when we work on all of the different communication skills, that 2 things happen. They communicate with clarity and they communicate with confidence. So that's why it's a separate step, right? So by focusing on all the communication skills that we talked about last time and some of them that I just mentioned and other ones as well, those things kind of automatically happen. And in addition to those things happening based on this strong foundation of strong communication skills, we can also do things tactically to improve our clarity and improve our confidence. Does that make sense? It's almost like there's 2 ways of improving those things. One of them is generally improving your communication skills, and the other one is focusing on clarity and focusing on confidence. Okay? Can I get some head nods? Does that make sense? Okay. It's not like a hugely esoteric concept here, but it actually is a little bit confusing, I think, because we have
Well, I mean, people you could be very clear with people, but not be very confident about either the message or the way you're conveying it.
Mhm.
I've definitely been in that situation where I had read something online and it was very clear I had to communicate it, but I didn't really know what the information meant. So it was
Yeah.
very superficial. So I knew that if I was challenged on this, I would not be able to hold up to the pressure
Yep.
of some of the stakeholders.
Yep.
And that came through. So I would pause and figure out, okay, what does this actually mean? And how do I defend my position? And then I would feel very confident
Yep. So
going into that
it's
communication
almost
mode.
like it's iterative. That's a good point, Stephen. It's almost like it's iterative, right? So if you feel yourself stumbling in terms of your clarity, or maybe in terms of your confidence, like we were just talking about,
Mhm.
you can focus on that thing. You could focus on confidence, but you could also focus on the other communication skills. So a great example is one of the communication skills that I coach many people on across various medium is how to introduce yourself, right? When you learn this framework, which is a communication skill, suddenly your clarity in your professional identity and your apparent confidence are elevated, right? And you may also, while you're introducing yourself using this framework, try to focus on your clarity and your confidence separately. Okay. So I wanted to ground us in that before I get into sharing with you two mindsets. And some of you actually mentioned these when we were brainstorming at the beginning. Two mindsets and three tactics. And I know normally it's the power of three, but I thought about this morning. There really are two mindsets that stand out as being really powerful for people to boost their confidence. And there are many tactics, but these are the three that stand out for me as getting a lot of head nods and stories back from clients who say that they work. And again, some of you dated these in the past. Okay. So the two mindsets are a growth mindset and focusing on your personal brand. And let me tell you, if you want to write those down in the first column here. So the mindset is of having a growth mindset is basically you can't lose. You can't fail if you have a growth mindset, right? If there's something that happens, it's a learning. That's what a growth mindset is. If I always think of Sarah Blakely, the founder of Spanx, whose father asked her and her siblings every Sunday, like, what did you fail at this week? And then they celebrated the failures. And if she didn't have a failure, she would be like in trouble or she would make one up because we celebrate failures in this household. And then she's like, look at me, I'm the youngest female billionaire, self-made billionaire in the world. And I attribute much of this success to my family sort of culture that we had of celebrating failure and of having a growth mindset. So, and whether you're preparing to, go out on stage or whether you're on stage or in an important meeting and you feel that shot of adrenaline, if you remind yourself, this is what I say to myself. I know what I know and I'm keen to learn more. And this kind of bridges the personal brand and the growth mindset. I know what I know. I'm confident about my expertise. And I guess Richard's point, right? About there's a reason that I'm here in front of the room, or there's a reason that I'm in this meeting, or I do have valuable knowledge that can help other people. So I know what I know and I'm keen to learn more, is the growth mindset part. And I think it was Jennifer who said, basically akin to this, I'm keen to learn more. If someone asks me a question that I can't answer, I will say, literally, okay, this time I'm using the word purposely. Literally, I will say, I haven't had that question before. Let me think about that for a second. Based on what I know, and then I'll say, based on my expertise, this is grounding my answer in my personal brand. I'll say, this is what I think, but like Jennifer said, I will get back to you, or let me think about it more, or let's talk about this, offside after the meeting is over, whatever the context is, right? So you can't lose. If you have a growth mindset, the specific example that I have of this is I over the last couple of years, I've done some really big question and answer periods, sessions. And one of them, I was told there was going to be over 1,000 people in the audience. And before I went out, it was online. So before I pressed, entered the meeting, I said to myself, I know what I know and I'm keen to learn more. And then literally there's nothing that anyone can ask you. Remind yourself of what you know and remind yourself that you are keen to learn. It is immensely helpful. Okay. And so the second mindset I've touched on, it's your personal brand. It's reminding yourself of your expertise and your passions. For those of you who have gone through the personal branding bootcamp, this is a game changer. You can print your personal branding template, remind yourself of your 12 to 15 themes and your superpower, and you will feel elevated confidence. I coach plenty of folks who are interviewing for jobs, and they tell me that this is the page that they have before they walk into an interview, or if it's an online interview, they have that sheet sitting in front of them that reminds them of their superpowers. And so that's the second mindset that I recommend for boosting your confidence. Stephen and Tracy, I know you haven't done the boot camp, the personal branding boot camp, but you do have access to the online course. I really hope you'll do it if you haven't started already. Everything that's in the boot camp is in that online course. Everything. Okay. So any questions about those two? Woo! Anything about those two mindsets? You guys are quiet. Okay.
I just have one, just like piggyback on what you say about based on my expertise, and then you say the personal branding. That remind me, yeah, I did use that like implicit. Like now I remind that I did use that like one personal brand is like being accountable to people, and I would definitely, and when I say I will get back to you on that, I would definitely get back to them.
Well, and then that reinforces your personal brand of being conscientious and trustworthy and all that stuff, right?
Right. Yeah.
Everything that you say and do is people, we are wired, we're social animals, and we're wired to constantly be scanning each other for signals that reinforce or that refute our judgments about each other, right? So I have judgments about each of you. We all have judgments about everyone in this meeting right now, about how likable they are, about how trustworthy they are, about how competent they are. And we're looking for signals that reinforce or refute that. So you want to consistently be reinforcing those positive things that you've taken the time to articulate in your personal brand. Okay, so I had to choose no more than 3. I challenged myself. What are my top 3 hacks in the moment? And 2 of them were already identified. So, and one of them I think is it's almost like a hybrid between a mindset and a tactic. And it was mentioned by, I think, Priscilla. So I call it relabeling that nervous feeling. I can't remember what the exact words that you use, Priscilla, but my clients that I work with on developing their overcoming imposter syndrome and communicating with confidence, when you feel that shot of adrenaline, instead of saying, oh, expletive, I'm nervous, this is going to be a disaster, that's negative rumination. Instead of going down that negative rumination path, be like, yes, now I'm fueled up with positive energy. That's the energy that's going to make me rock this meeting, rock this comment, rock this speech, whatever it is. Years ago, when I was doing yoga, at the very end of the yoga class, this teacher, it was a live class pre-COVID, and we would do like a 10-minute meditation at the end. And I went up to her, after the instructor, after the end of one of the classes, and I said, every time we do the meditation and I start to really tune into my body, I actually feel adrenaline. I can feel it like in my chest. And she said, congratulations, Andrea, you are incredibly self-aware. Like you're feeling your heart pumping. That is amazing. So stop feeling badly about that and be like, yes, now I'm ready to meditate. And that really helped me. Then whenever I felt that, I'd be like, oh, and then I realized later, this is similar to what I coach people to do when they're feeling nervous, when you feel that shot of adrenaline. And here's the kind of prototypical example. You know, when you're watching a panel, you're at a conference, right? And there's people on stage, maybe 2 guys and a girl, whatever, up 3 people or 5 people up on stage. They're sitting on bar stools and people are firing questions at them. There's a moderator, blah, blah, facilitator, whatever. And invariably, one of them comes off as being kind of aloof or lacking energy. And I'm thinking, that's the person who isn't feeling nervous. The other people are nervous and they come across as caring and having energy, right? So the next time you feel that shot of adrenaline, relabel it as a good thing. It's the positive energy that's going to help you succeed. Okay. This tactic, I know gets a lot of positive traction with people, a lot of success. The second one I was going to say is the one that I shared with you at the beginning. It's slowing the exhale. And the reason I think it's so effective is you can do it immediately, and research shows that it has an immediate impact. And I believe, because I believe the academic research, that therefore the impact is amplified, right? So it is going to work, and I believe it's going to work. So it's like a positive placebo. And then the third one that I'm going to share with you is a little bit more complicated, but it also is backed by research. And that's why I think not only does it work, it rationally makes sense, but when you know that the research says that this works, it'll make it work even more, it'll even make it more effective, okay? And it's this: talk to yourself the way a supportive friend would in second person. So this is about your self-talk. It's from this book, Chatter. Some of you may have seen me talk about this book. Yeah, the spine's yellow, so I filed it in on my yellow shelf, but this is what the cover looks like. By Ethan Kross, The Voice in Our Head, Why It Matters and How to Harness It. It's about how to avoid negative self-talk or what he calls rumination, and use positive self-talk to fuel your success. So based on his and other academics' research, the most effective self-talk is in second person, meaning you. So if I say to myself, literally, Andrea, you got this. Andrea, you practiced. Some of you were talking about practicing. You practiced. Andrea, you're really prepared. Andrea, you know more about this topic than other people in the room. Andrea, you're going to knock it out of the park. So according to his research and other research, talking to yourself like that is more effective than saying, I think I can do this. I think I'm smart enough. I think I did whatever. No. That's first person. You want to use second person. It's almost like your brain believes it when it's coming from someone else. Isn't that cool? Anyone have any questions or comments about the two mindsets and the three, I guess there's 5 altogether then, 5 tactics that I just shared? So it's growth mindset, focusing on your personal brand, specifically your expertise, your passions, and your superpowers. And then the 3 tactics are: label that shot of adrenaline as positive energy, slow your exhale specifically, and talk to yourself in second person. Questions or comments?
The last one, talk to yourself in second person. That's something I also saw research in runner training. Like you run a marathon, they did research, like they should say, you can do this. Now
Yes.
I can't do this.
Yeah. So Professor Cross specifically, he's at University of Michigan, by the way, Richard. I don't know if you ever heard of him when you were there. Yeah. I think he's in the organizational behavior faculty department in the business school. He specifically says he prompts you with, like, say your name and then you. So Jennifer, you know you can do this. So that's how you talk to yourself. Say your name and then the word you and then fill in the blank. Yeah. I love that, Jennifer. So you can extrapolate this beyond when you're on stage. How about when you're trying to achieve something else and you're nervous or you're not sure about you're lacking confidence? Yeah, love it. Anything else about confidence before we move on to clarity? Nothing? No? Okay. So I have 3 tactics that I typically surprise, surprise, the power of 3, right? That I typically focus on when I'm coaching people on communicating with clarity. But I want to back up and ask, just open question. I'm not going to go around the screen, just open question. What do you think it means to communicate with clarity? It's not a trick question.
Hopefully it implies that you do not need to explain yourself after you've shared some information. hopefully clarity means in my mind that you only have to say it once because it made perfect sense the first time. Whether or not that actually happens is a different story, of course.
Oh, I could pull that apart, Richard. So one of my tactics is to improve your clarity is actually repeating yourself.
Okay.
And you're saying the definition of clarity is saying things once, but I think this might be semantics, right? You're saying that people understand what you're saying, I think.
Right. Because I mean, the old tell them you're going to tell them and tell them what you told them is just reinforcement. But if you're not clear, then it doesn't matter what you're reinforcing. The way I heard it, the way I heard the question.
So clarity is the receiver of the information comprehending the message in the way that
Yes.
it's intended. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Anyone else have a different way of thinking about clarity? So when I make this observation, right, that when I coach people on improving their communication skills, two things happen immediately. Confidence and clarity are elevated. What do you think that means in terms of clarity?
I feel like there's a level of transparency or like being straightforward in clarity, maybe.
That's interesting. I love the word transparency because, ever since this question of should we bring our whole self to work and transparency is like, I don't think we should bring our whole selves anywhere. But if we're talking about in the context of communicating with clarity, it's almost like you don't want people to second guess that you're hiding something.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like I feel like this happens a lot on teams where there's a lack of understanding of like how you fit into the picture or like what the expectations are for you in your role. And so if there's more transparency like across the board, people know who's doing what and what's expected, like it's very straightforward and like laid out, then that to me is like clarity, if that makes sense.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
one recent challenge I had with clarity was I had been asked by my boss to let my team know that we were open to paying for training. So on Friday, I asked people to submit requests for any training that costs money. So they don't need to ask for things that are free, that are already available through our training resources. If people like pause, it's like, well, can I ask for training at a conference? Can I ask for training for certification? And I thought to myself, wow, they didn't want to hear the high level. They wanted examples.
Mm-hmm.
Here's what that looks like. Because to me, it would have been it was very clear that knowing that it was only for training that had to be paid for, I knew what that meant. They needed to hear examples of what that meant. So I think to be clear, you need to know who your audience is. What level of illustration do they need in order for a core concept to be communicated clearly?
So I asked the same question to a group of what was the industry is basically real estate investment. So it's this company downtown that's growing like in downtown Toronto that's growing like crazy. And I would go into this into their boardroom once a week for 8 weeks, and I did this series of communication skills workshops. And when we were focusing on communicating with clarity, I asked them this question, and the definition that we ended up deciding on, I guess unanimously in the room, was if you're communicating with clarity, then you're making things easily comprehensible. So easily meaning you're making things easy for your audience, for the receiver of the information, and they understand what you are thinking, like what your intention is and what you are thinking. So I think all of the things that we've been saying here in terms of providing examples, being transparent, et cetera, are all part of that. So, and then when we tease it apart, so it's easily comprehensible, you're making it as easy as possible for the people you're communicating with to understand exactly, could be directions that you're giving or something that you're teaching. Like right now, I'm trying to make it as easily comprehensible as possible, right? And then we broke it down further into the way that you do that is with, we called it the words, but it's more than words. It's like basically how you communicate it, how you choose to communicate it, and brevity. Because if you're going to make things as easily comprehensible as possible, how do you make things easy? It's like as efficiently as possible, right? So I said to them, I am not familiar with the words in your industry. Like I'm not familiar with the terminology or the vocabulary in each of your industries as well as you are anyway. So I'm not going to coach you on your vocabulary, but I am going to coach you on what the research says about how you can improve your communication clarity by making things as brief as possible, but in a way that's going to allow people to understand. Okay. So 3 ways that you can, and Richard already mentioned one of these in terms of repeating yourselves. 3 ways that you can make things as brief as possible. Let's start with the ironic one, right? It's ironic that the more you repeat yourself, the briefer you can be in your communication because people will understand what the point is. And the great example is also the framework that Richard shared. And I do this all the time. By the way, after I'm done here, I'm going to go have lunch and then I'm going to come back down here and I'm going to record. I have my microphone right over here, record a podcast. For every single one of my podcasts, I use this outline. Tell them what you're going to tell them, and then tell them what you told them. So you're actually repeating. So of course, in the tell them part, you're elaborating. You're probably providing 3 examples or 3 reasons or whatever it is. But you're saying the same thing 3 times. Okay. So don't be afraid to repeat yourself. By the way, I learned this one really the hard way because I would try to say something different ways, or I'd try to be clever because I didn't want things to be boring. It turns out that people will internalize things better if you use the same words, okay, and repeat yourself. And I absolutely love this framework. By the way, these 3 tactics are not mutually exclusive. They're all related to each other, which is going to make them probably even more helpful and usable to you. So the first one is ironically repeating yourself can help you communicate more clearly. The second one is the power of headlines. I just read something about this where the person called this out, and I love this. If you are making a point or giving a speech or teaching a class, whatever it is, don't be afraid to say, if you're going to take one thing away from this meeting, or let me tell you the main point of this entire speech, or based on today's boot camp private coaching session, the one thing I hope you'll take away, I do this all the time in the podcast episodes too, by the way. If there's one thing I want you to remember, it's this. So, and you can start with that. So speak and write in headlines. I heard about this also when I was interviewing Jill Nicolation. She's advertising. She's a retired advertising executive who's hugely successful. And she says, whether I'm talking to my team or I'm writing copy or creating a creative campaign for one of our corporate clients, you start with the headline. So today we're going to focus on confidence and clarity, and we're going to go deep into these and how they interact with communication skills and elevate you to credibility, right? So you start with your headline. And by the way, like I said, this is not mutually exclusive from the point that I just made about repeating yourself. Then, so that's the telling them, then you tell them what you're going to tell them, and then you repeat it again, and you tell them again what that headline was. Okay. The third, I see heads nodding. You guys all look like bobbleheads. Anyone have any comments about that or experiences with it?
Well, that sounds like my presentation outline. I always do that, but I also write reports that way, especially like audit reports. That's very, very useful for audits.
Yeah.
You get, okay, here's what I found. Here's the details, and then the summary. Okay, here's what is the deeper meaning behind what I found.
Yep.
So do we like some takeaways?
Yeah. In academia, these published papers that are published in these journals, they start with there's the title, but I'm not talking about the title, right? I'm talking about getting into the material. There's an abstract. That's the headline. The abstract is the headline. One more thing before we move on to the last tactic. This is a quote from, oh my gosh, School of Podcasting, Jackson, what's his name? Something Jackson. I can't remember his first name. He hosts a podcast called The School of Podcasting. And when I was first podcasting, he was basically my coach. I would listen every week, and then I started emailing him, and then he interviewed me on his podcast, and I interviewed him. Dave Jackson. Dave said, it's not just for podcast episodes, but this is for communication in general. You can speak in headlines. And he said, here's the thing. People don't get on a bus unless they know where it's headed. Whoa. I was like, that's such a good metaphor. You don't waste your time pressing play on a podcast episode unless you know what it's about. You're not going to waste your time engaging in that meeting instead of, grabbing your phone and quietly doing email under the table unless you know what's going on and there's something in it for you, right? So start
right. Sorry about that. On the counter thing, I've tuned into podcasts thinking it was about one topic, but it turned out to be about something entirely different. I never tuned into that podcast again.
Oh,
I was like, okay, well, that was a waste of my time.
yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, we've all been duped like that. You can imagine a podcast where someone says it's about this, and then actually it's all about some silly story or private joke they share with someone or something. Yeah. So, I mean, of course, you need to be accurate in what your headline is. So that's the second tactic. The third tactic, can anyone guess what it is? It's something that I preach all the time.
Power of three.
Yay! So I really encourage you. I think it's episode number 93. It's one of my favorite podcast episodes. I did a lot of research for this. There's a ton of research about why 3 should be your default. So it doesn't always work. But most of the time, if you're wondering, how many reasons I should provide, or how many examples, to your point about examples, should I give, or how many so I'm writing a book. I've got 3 sections with 3 chapters each, right? So it's, if 3 is not enough, make it a 3 by 3. The research shows that our brains are wired to consider trends. And once 2 things is not a trend, but our brain perceives 3 things as a trend, like there's strong evidence for something if there's 3. As soon as there's 4, though, our brain perceives that as too much. And when I was doing a workshop on communicating with precision, the woman that hired me actually jumped in when I said that. And she said she read some academic research that highlighted how our brains are wired. When someone presents 2, our brains make up a 3rd. And if we hear someone present 4 things, our brain discounts one of them. And I was like, oh, wow. So here's a fantastic way of communicating with clarity, establishing your brand, and saying it in a way that is also confident and credible. Okay, so we're working with all the layers of our pyramid here. Someone, you know, there's a decision to be made. Should we go with A or B? And it's not an easy answer, okay? That's why we're having the meeting, and people have different opinions. It comes to you. What do you think? Here's what you say. This is not an easy decision. There are definitely pros and cons of both. I believe A is the best option. You've established your headline. Let me tell you 3 reasons why. And I get asked this all the time by my clients. What if I don't have 3 reasons in my head? You know what my answer is? You are smart enough to come up with 3 on the fly, guaranteed. Guaranteed. So reason number 1, like so-and-so said, da 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 da. Reason number 2, something that hasn't come up yet, blah, 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 blah. And then reason number 3 is, after we implement this, this is what I think is going to happen. And so, and then at the end you say, like I said at the beginning, you know, version B or option B is also not without merit, but for these 3 reasons, I strongly recommend we go with option A. So when you answer like that, you sound smart, succinct, and even if they end up going with B, they're going to be like, don't forget what Andrea said about option A. Another great example of this is if you're in a job interview, or if someone says, you know, you're on the hot seat and someone says, Richard, tell me about yourself. Oh my goodness. Like often this is a test from headhunters. The way I suggest to my clients that they answer this question is, of course, using the 3-point self-introduction framework. My name is Richard. I'm a blah, blah, blah at blah, 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 where I blah, blah, blah. And then you could say there are many things. You don't know how long you're supposed to talk when they ask you this question.
Right.
There are many things that I could share about myself. Let me tell you 3. And then you choose one that you think is important, and then you choose another thing based on the context, and then you choose a 3rd thing. And then you say, you end with a future enthusiastic statement about, I'm really looking forward to getting to know more about this firm, or to getting to know you better, whatever the comment is. And you sound brilliant. And the thing that you're doing when you tell people at the beginning, here's what I think, or here's what I am, now I'm going to tell with you 3 things, you're doing them a huge favor, because you're telling them exactly how your answer is going to be structured, and they can follow along. So you could imagine if someone didn't say, now I'm going to share with you 3 things. You could just say, let me tell you something about myself. Let me tell you something else about myself. By the time they get to the 2nd or 3rd thing, you're going to think, how long is this person going to keep talking, right? But if you told them, I'm going to share 3 things, it's almost like you're providing them with a map, and they know exactly where you are. This is communicating with clarity. Okay. So again, when you're communicating with, I'm going to summarize now. When you're communicating with clarity, I encourage you to think about using the clear words and thoughts, but also using structure and being as brief as possible. Okay. By the way, you can always say, if you have any other questions, I'm happy to answer, or another great way of saying it is, I'm happy to elaborate if you want to hear more. Okay. And then you start with your headline. You mention that you're going to provide 3 reasons or 3 examples or whatever it is. And then you repeat and end with your headline. Okay. I want to hear now, we've got 5 minutes left. I want to hear Tracy, me too. Tracy said, I love this because I often feel I have to share everything. I look back at my old podcast episodes or my old email newsletters, and I'm like, oh my God, Andrea, shut up. It's like, but you know what? The truth is, I just wanted everyone to know everything that I was thinking. I was genuinely trying to be generous. Here's the thing. The most, you guys hear that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I don't know. Sometimes Zoom, it's an emergency alert in the province of Ontario. I think it's a test. Don't worry. What was I going to say? Sorry. The emergency alert got me off. I said, here's the thing. Oh my goodness.
Sometimes you tell yourself to shut up because you were talking too much. That's what you're saying?
Yeah. Okay, here's what I was going to say. As I said, the most generous communicators are the ones who do the work. So you think you're being generous by sharing quantity of information? The most generous communicators are the ones who do the work to structure their communication in a way, back to Richard's original definition of communicating with clarity, so that it's almost like nobody needs to ask questions. By the way, if they ask questions, it's probably because you were engaging and they're curious, right? But if you really want to be a generous communicator, it's not about volume, it's about brevity and structure. Okay? If there's one thing I want you to take away from today, it's probably that, but I want to hear from you now in the last 3 minutes. One thing that you have either off the top of your head or that you've taken in your notes that you think is a key learning from today. Who wants to go first?
I can go first. I think one thing that I really like, oh, I want to work on that is relabeling. Like when Priscilla first mentioning, I was like, that's brilliant idea. Yeah, it's exactly the same physical reactions, but I can say I feel excited about it.
Yeah. It's a
yeah.
game changer. It's a game changer, Jennifer.
Yeah.
What about you, Priscilla?
Yeah, I also have a teenager, so I use that with her too because she gets nervous about a lot of things that are coming. And I always tell her, just tell yourself you're excited. Just tell yourself you're excited. It will work out. So have to practice at home. It's funny because last week I was at Harvard Business School and the head coach of the basketball team, he said something very similar. The advice he gives to management and to leadership, he's like, be clear, be concise, and be consistent. So the 3 C's that he said that he advises all of them to do because that's the little formula, right? So I think for me, it's a lot of it being concise, right? And making sure that the clarity is there with being concise, because sometimes you tend to go longer than you have to, right? And that doesn't take you anywhere.
If you think about the people that come across as having really strong executive presence, it's almost like they don't speak a lot, but when they do, people lean in because it's really impactful, right? They don't ramble. Yeah. What about you, Richard? Any one thing stand out?
Well, I think reframing is important, and only because I've been working on that for a lot of years. And whether it's in communication or if any of you spend a lot of time in therapy, reframing is a really important tool that is used to change perspective. And I think that's the one that resonates most with me.
So, I want to talk more about that. Maybe we'll do that offline. We'll do that in the Slack group. Okay.
Okay.
It sounds an awful lot like controlling the narrative, which is something that I also preach a lot of. There's a million ways of telling the same story. Tell it in a way that, of course, is true, but that serves you.
Okay.
Is that related to what you mean?
I think so. I think so. Yes.
Okay, so we have an open Q&A tomorrow for those of you that can attend, and I'm going to record it. And if any of you have any questions, I said this to Stephen before the meeting started. If any of you have any questions, whether you're going to be there or not, you're welcome to either email them to me privately or put them on the Slack channel. But really, there's no structure to the open Q&A. I'm going to show up, I'm going to open the Zoom, and you can ask anything you want. And if you pre-send me a question, of course I will answer those then as well. Okay? Thank you. Hope to see you tomorrow. Bye.
Bye. Thanks.